Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with my review of the Dawnless Days mod for Total War Attila. I've been playing this, tried various campaigns. This campaign specifically is the one that I've gotten furthest along. Turn 54 as Gondor, and well, in essence, I've pretty much won this campaign. Pretty much. I do have an army over here under Boromir in Asgiliath. Mordor is not going to be able to take it. I've already beaten up dozens of assaults by them. And the only reason Mordor's still alive is I've been busy saving Rohan, which was about to be wiped out by Isengard. I also had to send an army to force the Corsairs to abandon their attacks on Gondor. Force a peace treaty on them. So, I think it's great that we have a Lord of the Rings campaign experience, a mod experience in Total War. It's been a while since we've had that. And this is the first time since really Medieval 2 that we have had this experience. The problem's been, of course, always down to the fact that you couldn't make custom campaign maps. Now, modders do have that tool. Exactly how it was created, that's its own discussion. But we now at least have that, or that tool at least is available, which is great. It can create these kind of experiences. Now, I do like a lot of things about the mod, but it is ultimately a Total War Attila mod. And Attila is not necessarily the best Total War game. In fact, it's really not a great game at all. It's got many problems. It doesn't work well on modern computers. It never worked well performance-wise as a game. It doesn't have UI scaling, all those kind of issues. There are guides, I'll link one in the description. But for instance, if you want the game to run well, you basically need to go into a settings file, change the CPU threads that the game is using, and then go into the game and lower a couple of settings over here. So, for instance, you go to custom, you set water to max performance, you set shadows to performance, maybe even lower, maybe you disable anti-aliasing. And if you want the game to look better than 1080p, you can also use resolution scaling on an NVIDIA GPU. So there are some steps to take if you really want this to work somewhat well. And there's still going to be performance drops. Maybe I need to lower some of the settings even further. That's one aspect about Attila. Now, Creative Assembly in their end of the year post have indicated that they might be looking to update their older titles, so fingers crossed that they do so. Now, the mod itself has a very interesting experience in the campaign because every single faction has their own things to deal with. Everyone has their own advantages and disadvantages. For instance, Gondor has an amazingly powerful army and a pretty good, stable economy and stable public order and research, even though they do get hit by a significant penalty over here with the Withering of the White Tree, which should be something you remove when you get to Aragorn, but maybe there is a way. I just got him as early as I could, and it's still there. Maybe I need to unlock this particular research. I don't know. Regardless of that, so Gondor has its own advantages. Rohan has also its own advantages. They have a good, powerful cavalry army. But the downside is you get Theoden, who's been basically poisoned by Saruman, and you suffer significant penalties, and you deal with constant rebellions. That's one of the things where I think the developers missed the mark, really. But again, mods are built on the constraints of the game, and there are limits to what they can do with regards to that. Or certain things that they probably would rather not touch. So that's where some of the Attila issues come in. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of effort put in the unit models, the unit cards, the individual, structures, for instance, and the idea of making each faction unique. So I greatly appreciate that. I do. I would prefer if no copyright music played, especially when I do disable music, because sometimes you do get it playing. So that's a bit weird, but they're using a lot of Lord of the Rings music and sounds. They're, like, for instance, the Gondorians are actually using Battle for Middle-earth, Gondor soldier sounds, etc. So there are those aspects with regards to some of the copyright issues. Lord of the Rings IP is, well, let's just say it's ridiculously complicated with who owns the rights to what. Anyway, And of course, it's very iconic for certain characters to look in a certain way. But yeah, there's a lot of uniqueness. For instance, with Gondor, I appreciate, at least in theory, the idea that you have a wide variety of units. You have fiefdom units. So basically the way fiefdom units work is you have a certain cap of units that you can recruit from a tier 2 barracks, right? So tier 2, so for instance, over here I have several Black Archers in both this army and in Aragorn's army. They're not as good as proper Gondorian bowmen, which, by the way, I've managed to lose those guys right here. But they are still pretty strong. However, there's only so many of them you can recruit because of the unit caps. You can increase it with, for instance, the beacons of Minas Tirith, though there is a maintenance cost on it. So you do have that balancing act between recruiting units and improving your economy. Now, my issue with this is not that balancing act itself. It's the fact that you start with very little, your initial economy is limited, and given the way that the AI works in Total War Attila and older Total War games, is you're going to constantly have to face off invasion. So here's what ends up actually happening. They try this balancing act. You're also forced to go for different research. For instance, if you want a tier 2 barracks, you actually have to research it first. So you do have that balancing act, and I think that is a good idea, but it's the execution of it. First off, requiring research to unlock certain units is always annoying. Tying buildings to research is also annoying. I've never liked that about Total War, and I hope Creative Assembly doesn't use that in the future. I know that they did it for Attila, but again, on older games, but again, it's not a good system. I don't think that the modders should have copied that because it's just frustrating. And the reason it's frustrating is because you might think it forces the player to vary their approach. Not really. The best way to play Attila is basically go hard on military power. And by that I mean, you have the following choice, basically. It's like, you can either go hard on military power by a cost of your economy, but if you go hard on the military power, you can obliterate your opponents early on in the campaign, because the AI is not going to compete with you. Like, my army right here has been annihilating the legions of Mordor in auto-resolve. And that's not necessarily going to be great. The reason is you should play battles is because they're fun, they're interesting, and so on. The reason you shouldn't be forced to play battles is because of the auto-resolve, but that's kind of what happens here. And it's also further frustrating, the fact that the way replenishment works in Total War Attila and the way they've chosen it to make it work. Actually, I think it's better than the baseline game, but yeah, still built on that. The problem is that it's slow to replenish units. Lords, in particular, take a lot of auto-resolve damage, all that kind of stuff. And I would say, oh, that forces you to make decisions. It does not. I can assure you of that. Since you know the AI is constantly going to throw its armies against you without gaining experience on them, or only doing so because of cheats on higher difficulties, you kind of don't care about your units. Really. I'm not even joking. So what you end up doing constantly throughout the course of the campaign is just like, oh, I fought a battle, my unit got reduced to half HP, here's what I'm going to do. Very freaking simple. Just expand it and recruit more. And it starts creating this situation where you're fighting dozens and dozens of battles within a short period of time against opponents that can't win versus you because they don't have the experience, they have the numbers. This is on normal difficulty. Obviously, on higher difficulties, you would have more experienced troops. That's also another nonsense that the CA did specifically, where like if you're playing on Legendary, the AI gets highly experienced troops very quickly. But even then, they're still bad quality troops, regardless of experience, and they're also led by bad generals. So you just bait the enemy into ambushes, or you attack them in sieges and demolish them because sieges, and then you win. The only reason I haven't won this campaign is not because I haven't been able to march on Barad-dûr. I could have. I have wiped out Minas Morgul. That's the reason Rune has it, because they resettled it. And Kirifungol, I destroyed that as well. There's a reason why there's a rebellion there. That was mine. So the reason I stopped before reaching Barad-dûr was to save Rohan, because otherwise Boromir and Aragorn would have certainly annihilated them. Basically, what I'm trying to say is Total War has always struggled with this idea of how they make a campaign mid-game and late-game work, if you're the kind of player who understands that you can do these things. And really, the issue is not so much understanding you can do these things. The thing is, the game incentivizes you actively. Because if you're not doing these things, what will end up happening is you'll be overwhelmed and you'll lose. There's a reason why people use... There's a reason, rather, why Legend of Total War got so big using cheese strategies, is because he, like virtually everyone else, was forced to deal with these systems. So between the campaign pacing, the enormous cost of buildings, and they are expensive, ridiculously so, the fact you only gain so much limited money, but you do have post-battle loot, or rather you have an option of gaining money from post-battle, it pushes you as a player to really take advantage of those systems. Because when you fight battles and you gain experience and you gain money, more importantly, it just means you don't need to build up an economy. And even if you didn't gain money post-battle, you'd still do it. You'd just be more incentivized to fight every single battle manually, and you're already doing so. And not fighting battles in a quote-unquote fun or proper way, but abusing things like siege, corner camping, etc. That's not how I think a strategy game should work. Some will say you could choose not to do so, to which my reply is, and has always been, that the way you should play the game is that the most effective way, outside of cheesing and exploiting, but the most effective way should be the most fun way. But that's always been a problem with Total War. So again, it's a problem with Total War. It's not really, of older Total Wars, it's not a problem with the mod. But I also do have to point out that the mod creators could have done things better in terms of casualty replenishment economy, or just level of settlements that you start with. It's kind of hilarious looking at their official Reddit where people are saying, oh, the campaign pacing is too fast. I would say it's not necessarily too fast or too slow. I would say it's all over the place. So on one hand, your settlements start at a very low tier, and it takes a long time to get going, dozens and dozens of turns to build your economy. Like, for instance, over here, I'm earning 10,000, right? And I'm spending 8,000 on just 2 armies. Right, so that is kind of the issue over there. Of course, it's always going to be difficult managing to make this portion of the map exciting because, you know, you got these massive fortresses of both Gondor and Mordor right next to each other. So that would always be tricky. I think they should have expanded this area of the map specifically and just, you know, added more settlements in the middle and all that kind of stuff, which even Battle for Middle-earth did, by the way. Just to have like a kind of middle point or kind of like dead zone, if you will, that would have not just allowed you to march an army directly from Minas Tirith to carrying Fungal in a single turn, for instance. Just an idea. That's one of those aspects. Or marching an army directly on Isengard from Dunseld, I believe that I did it. Or I was close enough. I spent 2 turns getting there. So you don't actually end up having that many strategic choices. You're either defending settlements or attacking settlements a lot of the time. If you are moving over things like the sea, for instance, as Gondor to attack the Corsairs, or you're moving across the mountains as the dwarves to take some of the settlements right here in the north. So, or wherever they are. They are here somewhere. Anyway, actually, it's kind of probably around there because, no, that's Lothlorien. Anyway, that's not strictly the most important thing right now. That is my issue. So there's inherent issues with Total War Attila, and I also think there were some bad decisions made. I understand that there's a lot of Total War players that do appreciate this kind of slow build playstyle, but I've played Total War like that for, I don't know, not 20 years. Actually, it has been 20 years because I started Rome 1. I think that kind of playstyle is very outdated. So, my conclusion in saying all of these things is ultimately a Total War Attila game. It is a mod built on the constraints, and it is a mod built on certain ideas that I personally don't think work very well in the modern age. It is, however, a very varied and interesting Lord of the Ring mod, and I would be lying saying that I didn't enjoy my time with it. I'm pointing out the criticisms based on what I would like to see improved, rather than to say that they did a bad job. Because I think they did a great job. I think the map looks lively, I think it looks interesting. I think it's one of the best custom mod maps that I've seen, at least in terms of visuals, right? I certainly prefer it versus how Third Age Total War looked back in the day, and yes, I did play a lot of that. So these kind of issues, interestingly enough, yeah, a lot of these things existed back in Third Age Total War, though I'd say Third Age Total War was kind of better because it was not built on the structure of Attila, whereas this is. So yeah, a lot of modifiers, constant rebellions, all those kind of things, right? That do end up dragging things down. And by the way, money is not even a freaking issue. It's just the way you gain it. Because like what you end up doing is just fighting endless battles, getting a lot of freaking influence, and then using that influence to embezzle funds with a lot of your leaders. What joy. Yeah. And there's things that are, kind of buggy and all that kind of stuff. But that is one of the issues that you do end up actually having. And I think they could have done a better job with respect to that. That's all. Costine signing out. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and enable notifications. Stay tuned for more.